Hey everyone, this is Victor from Cyborg for Life, and I want to welcome you to episode 133 of Limb Lengthening Live, where the patients interview the guests. And today we are doing a leg length discrepancy roundtable. And if you are new to the channel and you don't know what a leg length discrepancy is, it's when you have one leg shorter than the other leg. And essentially, 90% of the population has it. The question is it symptomatic enough for you to do something about it? So that means you can do things like shoe lifts, shoe builds, or get as crazy as all of us here and get limb lengthening surgery. I've sent an invite out to a few discrepancy patients, whether or not they join, I don't know. Some of them are in different time zones. One of them might be here a little later, but I'm here. And if you're a discrepancy patient and you're in the chat, feel free to join. The link is in the description. So I'm here to talk about, here we go. We got the famous himself. Sam, welcome. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good.
I am so glad you saw this and you jumped on because I literally, when I was clicking go live, I was like, I didn't invite Sam. So I'm so sorry. Oh my gosh. How have you been, man?
Good. Good. I've been real good. Um,
Okay.
yeah,
What we're gonna
things are
what
moving.
we're gonna do you go ahead.
Well, I was just gonna say things are moving. I'm feeling better every day.
Yeah. So what I want to do with you, since you're here, is just to kind of give a summary of your discrepancy journey, like how much your discrepancy was. You don't have to say like exactly like the whole backstory because they can go back and watch that. But how much it was, which limb segment it was in, when you had your surgery, and how you're doing right now.
Okay, so I've had a leg length discrepancy my entire life, um, and I've had now two surgeries for it. One, I had what's called epiphysiodesis, which is the removal of the growth plate. I had that when I was a teenager to try and let my left leg, which is the shorter leg, catch up. It didn't quite work, so I was at about an inch, about 2.5 centimeters, 2.5 to 3 centimeter difference, um, and I had surgery right after Thanksgiving last year. Um, Ended up doing 24 millimeters, so 2.4 centimeters of lengthening in the left tibia,
Mhm.
and finished the lengthening in late January. Started walking, I think March, and now I'm just waiting. I have a check in with my surgeon next month, and I'm hoping at that point that he gives me the go ahead to start running because I'm doing everything but. I mean, I'm spending time on the bike. I'm walking on the treadmill a mile at a time, 2 times a week. Um, I'm doing the PT, squats, body squats, lunges. I'm doing some lateral agility work. So yeah, I really just I'm waiting for his go ahead to say, hey, you can take the next step.
That is incredible, Sam. Thanks so much for summarizing. And you know, I think the most exciting part about the recovery part after limb lengthening, whether it's for discrepancy or stature, is just waiting for that green light. It's like, oh my gosh, I can just feel it. You're just ready to break out of the blocks and go, sprinting. But let's talk a little bit about your recovery. Like you just said, you're doing agility, you're doing jogs, you're doing the bike, all that stuff, squats and lunges. I want to talk about that because a lot of people, you had tibial lengthening, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So that's yep. So what is it like when you're doing a squat right now? Because obviously, a lot of patients are worried about, performance after limb lengthening. Like, what is that like for you? What does it feel like when you're squatting down?
It actually feels better now than pre-surgery because I had that discrepancy. I would, my heel would come up off the floor a lot when I was doing doing deadlifts. Even when I was doing squats, if I started to go low enough, like I'd have to shift my hips to try and keep them level under me. So, I feel it feels more almost natural now um, when I do that. The lunges are much more difficult because with my discrepancy, my muscles were compensating for that, and in the way they were compensating, they didn't get built up for the typical lunge. So the strength that I had in my legs was not the typical muscle or musculature for a lunge. So now I'm having to build that up, not necessarily from scratch, but it's something that the muscles were never used to.
Mhm.
So trying to do a lunge on my left leg is a lot more difficult, but it's more difficult strength wise, but it's easier balance wise because I'm
So
not
cool.
having that. I used to almost always, when I would step forward with the left, you know, tilt a little bit so that I tried to stay upright, because otherwise I'd start leaning to the left. So yeah, it's been interesting, the differences in like my form that I've noticed since the surgery. And it actually, some of it tends to be easier because I'm not trying to compensate for being off balance or um, or being tilted, and the muscle chain is working sort of more correctly.
Yeah. No, that's so cool that you said all that because I remember all of that. I think that a lot of people don't understand that a discrepancy patient, when people talk about biomechanics, where our biomechanics are like, screwed before the surgery, right, Sam? I mean, you know that. Like, we're walking like Frankenstein. And whether we're in shoe lifts or shoe builds, it's still not completely organic because you don't have your full proprioception of gripping the ground and feeling all the vibrations and whatnot. But what you just said is that your balance, your proprioception, everything is a little bit more level now that you're balanced at your hip level. But the thing is that I also want to ask about is like your knee, your joints. Like, what is that like, that loading? Because you just said like a lunge, a unilateral exercise, a bilateral exercise using both legs, a squat. That's easier because your hips are level. But a unilateral, like a lunge, you said that the muscle development was, it has to catch up. But talk about the joint loading, like the knee, the ankle, the hip of that lengthened side. I want to hear about that.
Okay, so prior to surgery, basically what spurred me to get the surgery is I started working out. I had stopped for some of the pandemic, and I was starting to work out again so I could get back in playing shape. And all of a sudden, my knee, my left knee, just, it was weird. It felt loose. It was painful. I started not being able to move laterally on it. I started not being able to go upstairs with it. Um, and so that's when I started physical therapy and realized the discrepancy was still there. Um, and even as soon as I was able to walk, I noticed a difference in the knee, how the knee was working, how the knee felt. Um, I mean, I'm walking now and I'm going upstairs in basically no pain in that knee. So it's been a marked difference, even though I'm not all the way through my recovery, but there's just been, I no longer have the knee pain and some of the hip and lower back pain that I was having. I no longer have that, just in a day-to-day situation.
Yep.
So
That's
yeah,
incredible.
it's been awesome.
That's really cool. And right now we have him joining the show. The guy that I was that was here last week, Ethan. Welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me, Victor.
100%, man. And he is another leg length discrepancy patient. His discrepancy was also congenital from birth. And Ethan, I want you to kind of just do what Sam did when he joined, is essentially just kind of a quick recap of, what was your discrepancy, which limb segment was it in, when you had your surgery, and what the current recovery looks like for you.
Yeah, absolutely. My discrepancy, we probably, just to give background, we probably discovered it when I was around somewhere between 4 and 6 years old. At that time, it was about somewhere between 3 and 4 inches, and it would have widened over time if we didn't do anything to address it. Initially, my family made the decision to opt for the shortening route, which essentially slowed the growth of my longer leg, so the shorter one could catch up. By the time I was done growing, it didn't catch up enough, so I opted to go for lengthening surgery. And I thought at the time, I had that surgery last year on October 9th, and I thought at the time that all of the discrepancy resided in my femur. The team that I'm working with, though, had a different imaging technique than what had been done on me in the past, and they discovered that I had a slight difference in both my tibias and my femur. But the femur was the biggest gap, so we just did femoral lengthening, and I did that last year. By the time I had that surgery, the gap was about 1.5 inches in total. So I have been walking since sometime mid to late April. I forget exactly when. And they cleared me, my doctor cleared me to go back to high impact activities such as running and sports about 6-7 weeks ago. And I've been able to get back into running. I've started to play basketball again, and I'm doing well with that. And right now it just looks like I ramped those up gradually as tolerated. And I'm scheduled to have surgery on the 14th of October for removing the hardware.
Wow. Wow, wow, wow. And your surgery was, you said January?
October 9th of last
October.
year.
Okay. Okay. So you said, okay, so September. So you're almost at the 1 year mark. You're about to get your nail removed. And I don't know if you guys who are watching the show right now picked up on what between Ethan and Sam, the difference. Sam had a tibial lengthening. Ethan had a femur lengthening. But look at the recovery differences between the tibia and the femur, right? So for patients who are wondering, hey, I have a discrepancy, should I try to do it? And they have the decision or the choice to do it in either their femur or their tibia. Look at the recovery difference. Ethan is ready to get his nail removed. Sam he's about to start running. And Sam, did the surgeon say that your bone is fully ossified and consolidated, or?
No, that's what we're waiting on. So the last one I had was 2 months ago, and there was still a significant gap. So yeah, we're waiting for it to be fully ossified before, he gives me the go ahead. But I mean, I can feel it. I can feel that it's almost all the way filled in. It's one of those things when I'm sitting down, I start rubbing it and I go, oh, look, there's not as much of a gap there as there was before.
That's incredible. I think there's a echo on your side, Sam, but I'll just mute you for a sec. But it's incredible to have Ethan and Sam here because both of these guys, very unique discrepancy cases, congenital, meaning from birth. Mine was traumatic. So I actually had a roller skating accident, fractured the lower left tibia, caused a discrepancy from a malunion and growth plate fracture, so it didn't grow anymore. So all of us had unique stories, but the point is we all come together, meaning that we had a leg height imbalance. It caused issues, meaning it was symptomatic enough that we had to do something about it. I tried shoe builds. Ethan, I believe you tried shoe lifts as well. Was it?
Yeah, I had a history of kind of combining different methods. Like obviously, it's 1.5 inches is too much to put into a shoe. So my surgeons over the years have built onto the exterior sole of my shoe and tried to combine that with shoe lifts. But honestly, it felt like wearing high heels on just one shoe the entire time, and it wasn't very practical.
I had the same thing, and I was trying to lift like that, and I got an all black shoe, and I would wear all black sweats that would kind of blend in. But I was like, man, these people in the gym are probably looking at me like all weird. And that was one thing because it was very aesthetic. So for people who worry about their proportions for cosmetic lengthening, we also have for shoe lifts or shoe builds, if you will, an aesthetic component to it as well. But incredible story, guys. All right, so Ethan, I know you had some questions last week. I think that we have Sam here. Hopefully he can answer some of your questions. I hopefully can answer some of your questions. I invited 2 other guys. I don't know if they'll show up. And then I actually have a comment from a discrepancy patient who just commented on my discrepancy video. We'll bring that up in a minute. But go ahead, Ethan.
Okay. I off the top of my head, I actually had a question for you, particularly with your recovery, Victor. When you had, so if I remember correctly, remind me, did you have tibial or femoral lengthening when you had your procedure done?
Tibial.
Okay. And when you had your procedure done, how old were you when you had your accident that resulted in the growth plates or in your growth being affected and your fracture?
It was I think it was 11. I think it was 11. So I only lived with my discrepancy for about 12 years when I got it done. So yeah, 11 to 23.
Okay. I'm kind of curious about if as a result of that you had any other additional abnormalities arise from that. I don't know whether with your gait or how your ankle developed since you were obviously still growing at that time. How did that go for you?
That's a fantastic question. In fact, I don't know if you know the term, but I know when Dr. Robbins was on couple lives ago, there's something called a windswept deformity, meaning like a windswept discrepancy, meaning when one leg is shorter, sometimes you'll get a little bit of valgus in the taller leg. It'll bend inward. this is your knee, a little bit of knock knee to compensate for the shorter leg, and a little bit of varus or bow leg for the shorter side. And that's what I had, right? So because of all of the muscle torque from squatting, running, track and field, all the stuff I was doing in high school, I did have that. So my knee of my taller side kind of knocked in, and I did have a weird walk. I still do to this day. It's nowhere near as significant as it was in the past. It's much straighter, a much more natural gait, but it is still there because of the muscle development, the joint development, the tendon development. So yeah.
Have you also noticed with the shorter leg, have you noticed any, have you had to be more difficult or diligent, I mean, with stretching that leg? Have you noticed that the muscles and tendons tend to be tighter on that side? How do you feel this far removed from your surgery?
That's a very good question. In fact, I was paying attention to calf raises this weekend. I noticed that it is a little bit tighter. It's a little bit stiffer than the other side. Do I stretch as much as I should? Probably not. But I think that it is due to, I would say, in theory, I don't know for sure. I have to really kind of like, do some research on this. But I think that the tendon is not a very, it doesn't like to stretch very much. It's not like muscle, because obviously when you lengthen, you get some new muscle, but the tendon, I think it does just stretch. So it's a very resistant tissue, avascular tissue, doesn't like to stretch very much. So I noticed that it's probably about 3 to 5 degrees different in terms of dorsiflexion ability from when I stretch. Like if I were to stand on like a ledge, I would notice that it's 3 to 5 degrees different than my right side or the non-lengthened leg.
Okay. Yeah, part of the reason I ask those is that I'm going through the process right now of, I almost feel like I'm relearning how to walk and run properly this time. And I've got a little bit of that windswept deformity in my left tibia that you were referencing. It's not super pronounced, but it's there, and they mentioned it to me. And if I had opted to go with lengthening both the femur and the tibia, which would have had to have been split up into multiple surgeries, since I also lack an ACL in the same knee. They wouldn't do it at the same time. They would have done an external device instead of an internal nail for that because of that deformity. But also I'm dealing with, tightness in the calf, trying to combat limited dorsiflexion I've had all my life, and I've also got an abnormally developed ankle on the left side as a result of that. So I'm just trying to push through with my stretching and see what I can gain despite my physiology. See, because I've never had that level of flexibility, and I noticed the dorsiflexion restrictions being more pronounced now than ever because I'm walking evenly and I'm not just kind of using the shorter leg for balance in between steps. So I noticed the need for flexion a bit more. So yeah, I've just been curious about your experience getting into your activities after your surgery and how it affects you to this point, and what strategies you found helpful for running normally, walking normally, or maybe not even normally, but optimally for your own
Yeah.
physiology.
Yeah. So one thing that I really noticed that helped me tremendously in my post-operative rehab, I wouldn't even say rehab, it was past the rehab stage. It was in the rebuilding stage where I was cleared to do full-on activity, everything pretty much where you are right now, which is about the 8-month mark, which you're just about there. I noticed that I started to do, with weight training, unilateral work, right? Because things like single leg press, coming down all the way, because a lot of times your body will compensate in funny ways if you're doing it bilaterally. Reverse lunges, I really kind of focused on walking lunges, things that, even running hills, where you were forced into a dynamic dorsiflexion, through motion and full active range of motion. And I noticed that that would help me over time, but I wouldn't go aggressive. I wouldn't go with like a serious incline right away, because you could rupture your Achilles, because I did get strained a few times on the Achilles because of this. So you have to be very gradual, very strategic about it in little increments, because if you go too fast, big injury. So I noticed that doing that, gradually building up the weight, the resistance, unilateral work was my best friend after my discrepancy, because not only do we have muscle imbalances, but we also have these biomechanical changes, and like you said, these deformities that we develop because of our discrepancy. So to account for that, I basically said, hey, I'm going to go do single leg work, and that helped me really close the gap between my non-lengthened leg and my lengthened leg. So will we ever be perfect as our non-lengthened side? No, absolutely 100% not. But will it be good enough to keep our spine healthy, our ankles, our joint, integrity healthy, and not, go through degradation? I think so. And how can I say that confidently? Well, I'm 12 years into my, journey from lengthening, or after my journey of lengthening, and I did go in to get a knee X-ray. I think it was 2021 because I had like some subluxation of my knee, and I think it was due to the discrepancy. And the surgeon said, "Hey, your knee joint looks healthy. You just have a little bit of subluxation because of just loose, I guess, ligaments or whatnot from the discrepancy." So I think that we do sacrifice, the adaptation that our body has compromised after, living with the discrepancy after lengthening, and we will never be perfectly normal, but we're much better off after lengthening. So I think even for you, unilateral work is going to be huge. Do you weight train?
Yes, I do.
You do. So are you incorporating unilateral work into your routine?
I am, but based on your recommendation, I'll probably up that as well, especially given
100%.
how useful that you stated this for you. And I do appreciate the recommendations. I will ask though, in response to your like hill sprints training, for example, to like kind of force your ankle into a maximal dorsiflex state. Something that I've experienced with my discrepancy, and I don't know if you experienced this as well, but in addition to the windswept deformity, I've also got a decent amount of pronation in that left ankle as
Hmm.
well. So when I force my ankle into a situation where I'm demanding its maximal dorsiflexion output, I do notice that it tends to roll inward, and I don't know if you experience that, but I'm
I
trying
do.
to find ways and explore ways to combat that so that I force it to flex how I want and not just cave inward.
That's what I want to talk to somebody who's really good with soft tissue work. I don't know who it would be, whether it's a sports med doctor or somebody trains with athletes. In fact, I'm seeing somebody next week. I strained my vastus lateralis from front squatting, and I'm gonna have to see somebody next week. I might talk to him about all my, you know, miscombobulations of my body and my puppet strings, if you will. But I think what I noticed that when I do tibialis anterior raises with the little machine at the gym, sometimes I notice that like the taller leg, it's more what's that? Yeah, pronated. And yeah, exactly. So what I'll do, I have to kind of focus, muscularly control it back to neutral and focus that way. Otherwise, it won't target the muscle in the belly. It'll hit it on like the medial side a little bit more. And then the opposite is true for the lengthened leg, right? So that little bit of supination on the shorter leg that was shorter, and then a little bit of pronation on that side. It's more of a mind over matter thing. I don't think, like I said, I don't think unless I get some sort of rotational correction with an external fixator will I ever fully correct that. I did an internal nail like you did. They only have so much flexibility in terms of what they can do with, deformity correction. So, is there some sort of rotational misalignment that happens with a discrepancy correction? We'll have Dr. Robbins on next Tuesday. I'm going to ask him about it because I think that the muscle and the tendons and the torque that you get from being an athlete, you played basketball, I did track and field, I did weight training, all that stuff is so significant under the forces that we're under. It causes the bones to rotate over time. And I think that we do. Did you get any EOS or any type of like, I guess, structural analysis of your skeleton?
Um, I wouldn't say it was, I don't think I had a formal EOS done or anything like that, but I've had each area of concern I've had imaged within the last year or two. So like I have had ankle specialists like look at my ankle to see what they think about um, potential in terms of dorsiflexion gains and things like that. But I don't think I've had a full EOS done.
Yeah, because I think because windswept deformities, it's not just that, hey, you're knocked in a little bit. I think there's a little bit of rotation some way because your body's compensating in every way possible to save your spine, right? To make sure
Yeah.
they're level. So that's the number one focus of the body. They don't care about what we are doing for our sport. So when we're running and going through these, you're a basketball player. I mean, think about what you guys do and sprinting full speed at a 4x1 or sprinting or long jump. That's what I did. Immense amount of like torque and pressure and all these forces. It's going to cause some sort of deviation and shifts. And I'll find out for sure from, Dr. Robbins, but incredible questions. I can't answer all of them because I don't know. I don't have all the answers. I think we'll have to talk to a surgeon for that. But I can tell you that one thing that I recommend definitely is incorporate unilateral training. I would say that dynamic, I guess you call it plyometrics, are also good. Calisthenics, body weight stuff. Anything that you can do really for the first, I'd say 18 months unilaterally. Still do it bilaterally, but I think that activating unilaterally. So the way I still do my workouts to this day is warm up, a bilateral movement just to kind of overload, wake up, activate fast twitch fibers. You're going to get some sort of activation to all fibers. And then I go unilateral, unilateral, unilateral the rest of the workout. And sometimes in on a bilateral, like a leg extension. What does that do? It really does help me to activate muscle imbalances that were there and that still kind of creep around, because I think that with this windswept deformity, it's a pretty severe thing for athletes because you're never going to be perfectly even. Even if you looked at both of my legs, there are some asymmetrical, you could see some asymmetries, but the thing is that will it be good enough to win? I sure as hell hope so. But anyway, that's my take on that, Ethan.
All right. Well, thank you, Victor. I appreciate the insight and sharing your personal experiences as well.
100%. So, real quick, we have another discrepancy patient who just joined. Amrit, welcome to the show, man. How are you?
What's up, brother?
How's it going? And this is the most recent discrepancy patient that I know of, besides the other guy that we know. I don't think he could join. He's in a different country. But so Amrit, what I've done with these other two guys here, Ethan and Sam, is ask them to give a quick synopsis of your discrepancy journey from how did it develop? Was it from a traumatic accident or from birth? Which limb segment was it primarily in? When you decided to have the surgery done, and then what's your recovery looking like?
Yeah, sure. So I was born with a shorter femur, 26 millimeters. About 5 years, when I turned 5, my parents noticed I was walking with my right leg more externally rotated, kind of limping. But so they took me to the doctor, and they're like, he's got a shorter leg. We're going to break his leg, blah, blah, blah. They got really scared. So they brought me home. They were kind of depressed for a few days, and they kind of just forgot about it. And because the body is highly adaptable, it figures out a way to stabilize. So I basically learned how to walk. I started walking on tippy toes, and then literally my body really figured out how to function optimally just by pulling up my right heel up and then posterior pelvic tilt, squeeze my butt and squeeze my abs. I did that for 31 years. And I was a highly functional athlete, fastest player, really good soccer player, I played the highest level I could in amateur. It was normal life. I didn't know any better, but I was working out, almost did a physique competition as well. And I was living life until I got into like meditation and started relaxing my body. And I started getting into deep meditation. And as I relaxed, all my compensations fell apart. And all the crutches that I created in my body, mentally, physically, emotionally, fell apart. And the fake heel lift I created just with my tippy toe, I started touching the ground because I'm like, this is not right. Why am I not touching the ground? So I started touching planet Earth. And as I did that, here came pain. I started feeling pain in my lower back and my neck. Started seeing all the torques and the misalignments that were actually there, but which I was hiding by doing a posterior pelvic tilt, squeezing my glutes and squeezing my core. So that took me down a nice rabbit hole, and I realized I had an inch discrepancy. Just in January or February. So I got my leg broken in May 13 in Montreal, which was a beautiful experience. And doctor told me I can get off crutches 2 weeks ago, and I'm doing 10K steps now since then.
Wow. Awesome journey, man. I remember when you first reached out to me, and I was like, dude, like you showed me your x-rays and I was like, you have a discrepancy. This is an easy fix. Go to a limb lengthening surgeon, get it done and call it a day. And now do you regret that decision, or you think you should have done it sooner?
I feel like a god walking around.
Yeah. Right.
It's like, I feel like a god. I'm like, this is how a normal human feel. Like, how can you ever be sad? This is like the best thing ever.
It is. And I bet Sam and Ethan felt the same way. Like, guys, when you were able to when you were cleared from crutches and like, walking ambulatory devices, what was the first thought or the first feeling that went through your head, Sam?
For me, I was amazed that I wasn't in pain trying to walk. Like, I'd gotten so used to it that the absence of it was shocking.
That's crazy. Ethan?
For me, so the year in May of last year, since I had my surgery in October, I had a different procedure in May done that required me to be on crutches for 5 weeks. And I thought, well, if I go from being on crutches to 5 weeks, and then this next procedure I ended up being on crutches for 6.5 months in total. I'm like, it felt strange to be on for 5 weeks, putting weight through again. I was like, it's going to be really strange to put weight through after 6.5 months. But honestly, after you take a couple of steps, I felt very similar to the first time I was on crutches. And it was, it was a strange experience, but it was also really relieving because I felt like I was walking, even though it was awkward, I felt like I was walking even for the first time in my life and standing even. So it was a serene experience too. So I enjoyed it.
I concur with you. I mean, the same thing. I experienced the same thing as Ethan here. I mean, I remember the day that my surgeon said, "Hey, you can get off crutches." I tell you, I put my foot down. I actually started to tear up, and I'm a really tough guy, but no, it was pretty surreal because, like you said, I felt like I was balanced for the first time ever. And although I expected to feel balanced, until you actually do it and physically feel it, it's kind of hard to explain. So it's a really powerful experience, and I think that's the power of the surgery because it's your real foot hitting the ground. It's no longer a shoe builder or shoe lift or anything like that, artificial or makeshift. It's permanent, and it's truly powerful. So cool stuff. And then we got Brett here. Brett, wrong week, man. I'm just kidding. This is a Discrepancy Roundtable, but welcome, Brett. We love you. How are you doing, man?
Yeah, I'll just listen, man. Don't let me steal anybody's number.
No, you're cool, man. In fact, you can probably chime in a little later about how you're feeling with the pain and stuff. All right, guys. So we got all their stories, their experiences with lengthening. Now we're gonna go ahead and answer if there's any questions in the chat here. I think I see one, and then I have a comment that kind of got kicked through the discrepancy thing. So this is from Ab 1120. I think Sam, you might have actually answered this in the chat, but let's go ahead and answer it live for the podcast. So Sam, I have a 3 centimeter discrepancy in my left leg with surgery scheduled in 6 weeks. How was the pain management after the surgery? Did you take time off work?
So for me, the pain management was really about the post-surgical pain. Coming off post-surgery, like I would say the first 2 to maybe 3 weeks, it's just like I had timers set on my phone so that I would be able to take the next, the next pain med. So it's like you can take one of these every 4 hours, you can take one of these every 6 hours. So but I knew that from previous injury experience that if I waited until I was in pain to take the pain medication, I would be in a much worse place. So I really tried to schedule it. But once that happened, once I got past that post-surgical pain, the lengthening pain was manageable for me. I took 7 weeks off work. I probably could have come back in a month. I probably could have come back while I was still doing the lengthening. I stayed out of work until I was done with the lengthening, but the actual lengthening, we went pretty slow on my tibia. We did a half millimeter a day, and so it really, as long as I was diligent with the PT, it was pretty okay. I did switch from, the pain medication, the OxyContin that I was given, to using edibles towards the end of the lengthening. And by that time, I was just taking medication to help me sleep. It wasn't for like pain during the day. I could manage that either myself or with basic Tylenol. So really toward the last half, I'd say, of my lengthening and into my actual kind of rehab, the initial rehab was, just taking some medication to help me sleep.
Gotcha. And I think there we go. You sent me a spreadsheet with all of your like your tracking of your pain meds and everything like that. And I plan to shoot a video on that, and I share it with patients here and there, but I plan to shoot a video on that because it's very informative. But I want to go to these other two guys and talk about their pain after the surgery, because it's a really big factor. In fact, I was even debating, like, do I really want to go through another broken leg, an elective broken leg? Because you have to choose to do this. So Ethan, give us your experience about the pain post-surgically, like right in that immediate post-surgical phase. And then did you experience any pain after, let's say, 6 weeks or so, or was it kind of just a waiting game for you?
Well, personally, I expected the most painful part of recovery to be the lengthening procedure or the distraction phase where they push the ends of the femur apart. But to be honest, that was probably the easiest part of recovery for me, or one of them. The most difficult was actually just I had never broken a major bone before, and your femur is the largest bone in your body, to my knowledge, and it was definitely painful at first, after probably for the first month or maybe month and a half or so after the operation, especially once pain meds wore off. Now, I wasn't really using any of the narcotics they prescribed me because I don't tend to do well with those mentally. I get bad migraines from stuff like that, so I tend to just stick with like Tylenol, since they don't allow me to use ibuprofen for now. So that was sufficient, but I will say that the pain, like particularly when I had to move my leg around, it would feel like I remember laying in the hospital, because this was the only procedure I've ever had to stay overnight for. And I remember laying there in the hospital bed, and I'd try and lift my leg up just to see what it felt like. And it felt like the my lower leg bones and my upper leg bones wanted to go different directions. So it was a really strange feeling. But after maybe a month or a month and a half, the pain was always manageable, but it was still significant for that time period. But after that time period, when we got into distraction, and even though I was on crutches and everything, it really wasn't too bad.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, it's just that post-surgical pain, really. But let's get Amrit's take on that. Amrit, what was your pain like post-surgically? You had a very unique and rare experience, if I should say.
Yeah. So before I even started, I defined what pain means. Pain is a feeling. It's subjective. If it's subjective, it's different for everyone. So instead of anticipating pain, I wasn't anticipating it, because if I could change my perspective and perception on what pain is, I could start signaling a new signal. So before even going in, I was doing a lot of work, a lot of meditation, a lot of research into this stuff. And then going in, like after I got my leg broken, I didn't take any morphine. I took Tylenol for 2 weeks, twice a day. And then I just focused more on meditation, laughing a lot, because laughing releases endorphins. So if you can change your state of being, your energy, you're releasing different set of chemicals in your brain. So if you release a different set of chemicals, you can create the same chemicals you're creating by taking drugs. So I learned that. And I used that model, and it worked. So I didn't take many. Yeah, I just took 2 weeks of Tylenol. That's about it. Otherwise, it was really smooth, no pain. There was soreness, but there's a difference between soreness and pain. And it was more soreness because your leg is broken. So I was just differentiating between the two. Is this soreness or is this pain? So there was soreness, but other than that, it was pretty smooth.
I love it. I love it. I think that one thing that, if you notice from all these guys on here, including myself, we're athletes, right? So that pain tolerance. This is one thing that Dr. Robbins and other surgeons, many other surgeons that I've interviewed have said, is if you become involved in some sort of physical activity leading up into limb lengthening, you don't have to do it like within the first 3 months before lengthening, but like in the years leading up to lengthening, if you know you're going to get it that far out, or at least let's say a year out, it can really help you to kind of deal with the physical stressors that you might be able to kind of like determine, hey, what is that input? What's that pain sensory feeling like? And how to kind of like handle it. Amrit just said it's mind over matter. He just manifested like, hey, or thought about pain of like, hey, I have to determine what pain is. Did somebody just leave? I think I lost somebody. And then he just handled it from there. Same thing with me. Like I've had several broken legs before, so I knew what to expect. I just was like, will I get back? Ethan, he was an athlete. Sam, athlete. So we were used to physical pain. So even though it was painful, our tolerance of that pain was well received. And that's why we kind of just turned it into a waiting game. So I was actually just about to ask Brett about his pain, even though he's a stature patient, but he might come back on. All right, cool. So what I want to do now is actually share my screen. There's a oh, here he is right here. Let's just get his take real quick, because Brett did both femurs and tibia. So Brett, while you're here, actually, you can kind of chime in here about pain real quick. So you did quadrilateral lengthening, but I want to talk about the pain real quick. So right after you just recently had your next set of legs broken, what was the pain like in the first, let's say, 3 to 4 weeks? What was that like? Was it similar to what these guys just said?
Yeah, I mean it was pretty bad the first week or two, but I believe this time it kind of exponentially got better quicker. I mean, obviously now I'm already feeling pretty much back to normal, but little things like turning over on your stomach, things like that really hurt your legs when you when you try to do it. Yeah, so I think it was. I've explained this to you before. My first tibia surgery was probably the easiest, and then the femur 3 weeks after tibia was the hardest, and this is probably in the middle for me. So.
Gotcha. Very cool. Awesome. All right. So let's see. We're gonna go to this comment that let me just share my screen, and I'm gonna have Ethan. You can take the take first. I'm gonna read it out, and let me just see if I can read this. Can you guys see that? I think it's up. Yeah, okay. So this was a comment Hannah left on the discrepancy video on my channel. It was the most recent one. She says, "Hi, I'm considering a femur lengthening surgery with a precise nail. I've suffered from lower back pain, shoulder pain, knee pain, and hip pain most of my teen to adult life. I finally got diagnosed with an LLD when I went to a doctor for hip pain, and I found that I had a torn labral joint in my right hip of the longer side. I have just had surgery to fix the labral tear. Now I have to decide how to correct my LLD, my discrepancy. I have a very opposing opinions that are scaring me. Some doctors say surgery is too risky. Others say I should do it because my discrepancy is going to cause so many problems. They also agree on the measurements of my. They also disagree on the measurement of my difference. And this is why I picked on Ethan for this. But I can see in the mirror the difference is significant. It's estimated between 1.9 to 2 centimeters. I'm very active, and I want to continue that way. Do you have any advice or peace of mind that the surgery is not as risky as they say? I'm trying to do a shoe lift right now, but it seems like it's so unrealistic to wear this all the time. Hence, Ethan and myself. In different shoes, and it does not correct for the full difference. Thank you for your videos, blah, blah, blah. All right, Ethan, you're up.
A couple things I'd say about this particular case, and obviously I can only speak to the details that we have in front of us, but I would say that I'd consider the risk in relation to your goals, because as far to my knowledge, anything below like 10 millimeters or 10 to 15, depending on which doctor I've spoken to over the years, they think that is a normal physiological variance. It's usually 10, which is a centimeter. So yours is above that, and mine, by the time I had my lengthening surgery, was about twice of yours. But I would say that I certainly resonate with you still feeling your discrepancy significant at 1.9 to 2 centimeters, because I think that that is a significant discrepancy, and it's beyond a normal physiological variance. I will say that I understand the shoe lift being unrealistic. You can get custom built ones that are fitted to you that I think help somewhat better in my experience, but not perfectly, because obviously I opted to go for surgery instead of continue to fiddle with that for the rest of my life. So I would say personally, if you're trying to reach if you're an active person and you're worried about how the impact of a lift or building onto the external sole of your shoe for the rest of your adult life, or any of those sorts of things, and you want to have a more even base and not have to be impacted by your discrepancy athletically, I would recommend surgery. But I would also say be careful about tampering with your athletic ceiling, because it is a major decision to have your bone intentionally broken on purpose in order to lengthen the gap that they're going to create for it. But I'd also say, how much of your symptoms are the result of you being told at this point in your life that you have a discrepancy, as opposed to the actual discrepancy? That, as Victor was mentioning, mind over matter earlier, I do think that's a significant impact. To an extent, you'll notice it if you're born with like a few inches discrepancy. You're gonna know something is off from the get-go. But some people go with a discrepancy that might be around yours, or maybe a little bit slighter than that, that they don't notice for all their adult life. So I'd really say, how much do you think it's impacting you functionally, as opposed to just mentally? But if you do think it's impacting you functionally, and you're worried about lifts getting in the way of your athletic pursuits, then I'd say that it's absolutely worthwhile. But I would say pick a good surgeon, because this is a complex procedure. And part of the reason I ended up doing this procedure myself is that I was very impressed with the team that evaluated me, and they were the only people who have imaged me over my entire life to discover that I actually had a slight discrepancy between both my tibias and my femurs, and I thought all of my discrepancy was in my femur for most of my life. So if you decide to go through a surgery, pick a good surgeon, because you will be thanking yourself in the long run for that.
So well said. Thank you so much for that take, Ethan. Sam, what's your take on this? Because you had a similar discrepancy. I think it was 2.3.
Yeah, mine ended up being 2.4, and yeah, I had a similar experience in that it was difficult to figure out exactly what my discrepancy was. So one of the things I would recommend is, when you speak to a doctor about it, they're going to try and figure it out based on a standing x-ray, but you should also have them, they're going to have they have little blocks that's 1 centimeter, 2 centimeter, 3 centimeter, even half centimeters. Have them stick those blocks under and take x-rays like that, because it really is that I found that much more a much better way to try and figure out what the discrepancy was, rather than an x-ray and then they're looking at the x-ray and they're using the mouse on the computer to say, okay, this is the length of this bone and this is the length of this bone, and here's the discrepancy and here's how much hips are tilted and so forth. So I would definitely recommend going to a doctor who will take those x-rays with those blocks under. And for me personally, also very active. And one of the reasons why I did start using a lift, and I've used a lift on and off pretty much my whole life. I walk around barefoot a lot, in sandals a lot. If you're playing a sport, it's really hard. In my case, you can't play soccer with a lift under your shoe. Like it just doesn't work. So, there's that kind of impact to the activities that you do. If you're active in that you're walking or you're running, sometimes a lift or a custom shoe can work in those cases. But if you're playing a kind of sport, or let's say you live by the beach, you're going to the beach a lot, then lifts don't typically work. The other thing that I would say is, especially now, if you're going through physical therapy from the labral surgery, talk to the physical therapist about trying, as Vic has talked about, the unilateral exercises to try and build up the strength, because that's one of the things that can help with the discrepancy, is if you strengthen that leg. So yes, there are structural issues that cause problems, but it's also in the underlying musculature and how that works that causes those issues. So if you are with a physical therapist now, talk to them and see, hey, what can I do to try and compensate for this discrepancy? That's how I got to this decision, is I started physical therapy to try and retrain my muscles because they were no longer compensating. And eventually it got to a point where it was, no, physical therapy isn't going to solve this issue. But we started out thinking it might be able to. So, those would be my recommendations, is the x-rays with the blocks, evaluate the different activities that you have in your life and how wearing a lift may or may not be possible in those activities, and then talk to your physical therapist about whether you may be able to manage the discrepancy via physical therapy. But for me, none of those worked, and I ended up getting the tibial lengthening, and I'm very happy that I did. But again, having that process of, these are the things I can do, and these are the things I can work on to see if they solve the problem prior to surgery. And then if they don't, or if they don't provide you the the solution that you're actually looking for, then you can move on to surgery.
You see, this is why I love doing this. Both Ethan and Sam, if you notice what they did, they said, "Hey, look, let's start with conservative methods first. Let's see, is this discrepancy symptomatic enough that it's going to bother you, or is it all in your head?" And then Sam said, "Hey, here's 4 pieces of advice to try out before you even consider surgery at all." And I think that's incredible. And the block method, that's a huge thing. I said in the discrepancy video, a lot of, I'd say, basic level orthopedic surgeons, not limb lengthening surgeons, advanced orthopedics, they will just straight up take a standing x-ray. But your body is so good at compensating with muscle and just torque and like where you stand, right? You have to know how to stand properly because your hips have to be level or semi-level before the pelvic obliquity seeps in. So all these tips are coming from real patients, right? And they have lived it. So these are golden pieces of advice. So, all right. And then Amrit, I want to get your take. And then I think real quick, I actually want to answer Grizzy's question here. I completely agree. I think that'd be great. So he's saying,
Hey, Victor, I just sent you my pictures on email.
Did you?
Right now. You can post them up. There's 2. There's one block method. There's one no block method. It's perfect.
Oh, really? Okay.
It's
I will do
both
that
as
you're answering. But that's exactly what Grizzy was saying. He's saying, "Hey, can we have the scans because it would be easier to conceptualize what these guys are saying if we had something to show." So I'll put that up. But Amrit, I want you to go ahead and help Hannah out here. Give her your take while I pull up your stuff.
Yeah, like first thing would be just like the only thing I trust, because I've used more than one EOS scan and the normal X-rays, is getting an EOS scan, because that's the most up-to-date technology, and that's going to give you like up to the millimeter precision almost. And then even getting more than one for peace of mind. So I had one taken standing with no block to see what it looks like, and then I had one taken with a block to see what happens. And then that's the email I sent you with both scans. And then because I had done a normal X-ray where they just do the X-ray, and they said I had a 3.32 millimeter discrepancy. Another one said 36 millimeters, and then when I did the EOS scan, both times 26 millimeters. So I was like, there we go, I figured it out. And then next was just like, I think her doctor said it's risky. So I would ask, why is it risky? Like, why do you think it's risky? Because it's kind of like vague right there. It's like, it's risky, but like, why? Because my orthopedic surgeon didn't think it was risky. So it's interesting to see, like, does she have any other conditions? How old is she? There's a lot of stuff we don't know. But I think if you have the right data and you have a surgeon who's experienced, I think it's like a no-brainer.
Excellent. I mean, and then that's what all the same things all these guys are saying, is saying, "Hey, we tried all these things first, but we ended up going with the surgery. But they're turning out really, really well, right? Like Sam is here about to start running in a few weeks. Ethan's already running. He's looking to get his nail removed soon. Amrit's back to full-on walking, normal walking. And Amrit, like, what's your prognosis look like? What's the recovery? I didn't think I heard that too much earlier.
Yeah, honestly, I don't know. It's only been like 3 months since I had my leg broken. But
that's right.
Yeah,
May. I'm so sorry.
It's only been 3 months, but I just, because I would have walked even faster, but my X-ray is once a month, so I have to wait for my doctor to say, okay, you can get off crutches. So right when she said that, I got off the crutches within 7 days. So it's been about, I think, week 2 off crutches, and I'm doing 10K steps a day. So it's very smooth. I'm just waiting for the next X-ray so I can do more.
Absolutely. So what I noticed is that when I try to show your X-rays, it kind of freezes my screen for a second. So I'm trying to find a way to do that. But real quick, I want to answer. I want you guys to answer this question, or at least one of you guys to answer this question from Machiavelli. So he's actually directing it towards Sam. Were you able to drive while you were lengthening? Do you think it's possible to drive to work while you're lengthening?
Yeah, I mean, for me, luckily I drive an automatic. If I drove a stick, I wouldn't have been able to push in on the clutch with my left leg, because that was the tibia I was lengthening. But yeah, I was able to drive. My worry about driving was typically around the how the medication would affect me versus actual pain. So I was driving, during the lengthening with no problem. and I just had my crutches in the car with me, and so I'd get somewhere and pull out the crutches, and it was actually pretty easy to drive during the lengthening. So I wouldn't, for me specifically, I still found it hard to like concentrate, even though I wasn't necessarily in pain. This is outside of driving, but just being at work during the lengthening, even if I wasn't in like pain, I couldn't concentrate well. So I was glad that I took the time off, and my job allowed me to. But push comes to shove, I probably could have gone back sooner.
Very cool. Very cool. Alrighty. So Amrit, I'll try to get those scans up here towards the end. Right, we're about to wrap up in a second anyway. But real quick, Ethan, I noticed that when you were asking me earlier about the dorsiflexion in my calf and like my ankle, you had femoral lengthening, I had tibial lengthening. There was an explanation for why I had that, deviation or the discrepancy in my dorsiflexion. I think for you, it must be directly due to the deformity, like the windswept deformity, and like that, the ankle and how it's kind of like supinating and pronating and different stuff. Because I wonder, I'm trying to think back to before my surgery. I think that I did have some. It was better, the dorsiflexion, but I think there was still some restriction because you had femur lengthening, right? And you're talking about
Correct.
your ankle, correct?
Yep.
Yeah. So it must be due to the discrepancy and how the ankle has some give and take. I will ask Dr. Robbins next week, and hopefully I'll get that answer to you. I'll shoot it over to your email or something like that.
And if you wouldn't mind, when you have that conversation, if you're able to, something that might be helpful for my particular case, if you are able to work it in or bring it up somehow, is the impact of, particularly how related dorsiflexion limitations are with limb length discrepancies, as well as ball and socket ankle joints, because that is kind of how my ankle joint developed as a result of my discrepancy. And so I'm curious how that might play as a confounding variable for my circumstances.
You got it. I'll definitely.
I just wanted to chime in a little, Victor, on this. As I'm currently lengthening right now, my feet, it's interesting. The physical therapists here, they're great, and you get to have different ones. So different ones find different things. But, I'm quadrilateral, so my ankles are very tight and get tight very quickly. It's been a struggle. But on top of that, I wonder if part of me, I feel like with the femur, there's the muscle right above your knee, or I guess the muscles right above your knee, right? What would that be? Your hamstrings and kind of that area has to straighten your knee, right? And your knee has to be straight for your ankle to be, your ankle has to be, knee has to be straight when you bend your ankle. Like if you bend your leg and bend your ankle, you're cheating. You're not really doing it the right way. So I'm just wondering if part of what he's talking about is he has to keep that knee straight to also keep the ankle bent. So there is a combination through there. So yeah, I'd be interested to learn as well. But another side part of that I wanted to tell you about I'm having is my physical therapist, literally the muscles in my feet. Like I've never really gotten foot massages before, but those muscles in the bottom of my feet are just so tight right now. Even my toes, I'm having a hard time pointing my toes down. They want to point up because of all that pressure of me pulling my ankles up all the time against my tibias lengthening. So yeah, I am really struggling with that. I just wanted to tell you right now, it's very tight through my ankle area right now. Definitely a struggle I'm dealing with. So anyway, just want to throw that in there.
That is super helpful, Brett. And I think that was what I was thinking Ethan was getting at earlier with me. And I was like, it's definitely due to the lengthening, right? Like, and I know when you're lengthening, you get all kinds of supination, and there's actually inversion and eversion, all that fun stuff with the ankle, give and take. But, I just, you're right. I want to get a surgeon's perspective, but that's super helpful because I have your take now, Brett. I have Ethan's take. I have my own experience. I'm going to ask Dr. Robbins next week because it's just like, I need a good explanation because I just don't I don't know why or where it comes from. He'll probably say, oh, okay, this is why. I'm like, okay, cool. So I'll definitely be asking that. But okay, guys. So we're gonna be wrapping up here in a second. But I want to just Sam just sent his X-rays, so I'm gonna share that. So and then I'll share Amrit's that he just shared. So real quick, because Sam's is it was in the OneDrive Amrit, so it kind of came up a little easier than yours in the email. I don't know why, but did I give you a folder link? Anyway, this is Sam's link, and then I'll pull up Amrit's. Let me just share it. Hopefully my screen doesn't freeze, but let's see, because this is some crappy software, but let's see. Fingers crossed. Window, here it is. Okay. Can you see this, Sam?
Yeah,
Good.
this,
Okay.
yeah, this was right after the surgery. This was literally, this was before we even started lengthening at all. So yeah.
Well, you lengthened some, right?
No, we hadn't lengthened at all yet. This
Well,
was.
where's the big gap from?
Oh no, you're right. You're right. I'm not sure. Let me see which one this is. Maybe I sent you the wrong one. Maybe I sent you the one from the end of lengthening rather than the beginning.
Okay, send the other one. I'll pull Amrit's up in a second.
I wanted to tell you an interesting tidbit I figured I learned from Dr. Robbins, Victor. During my rebreak surgery of my tibia, I was looking at my x-rays like here, and he said that because he didn't do the reaming process during the rebreak, that the break actually starts healing slower. Like the reaming process is actually a catalyst to promote initially the bone growth. That was something he told me, so it was interesting to learn.
It's super interesting, and I remember him saying that way back in one of his first introductory interviews, because of all that, the bony fragments and whatnot. You're moving it around. It's kind of like using motion to kind of stimulate those osteocytes. A lot of the reason why the accordion technique works to stimulate, poor bone regenerate in the gap. But it's incredible what these surgeons can do. They can kind of say, "Hey, it's not working. Let's play some chess and get that to respond." Okay, so here's Amrit's. Let me just see if I got the first one. So this is him standing. Amrit, this is you. Go ahead and explain this one. So you're standing both feet flat on the ground, but you have your discrepancy here, correct?
Yes, that's correct. Both feet flat on the ground and with a discrepancy.
And you can see his pelvic obliquity, meaning like, look at that big tilt in his pelvis there. That is not good for spinal health long term, joint health here in the femur as it sits in the acetabulum, and then you have knee, ankle. I call it the kinetic chain of pain that he's going to feel most likely. Where'd you feel it more, taller leg or shorter leg?
So I felt it nowhere because I created a fake shoe lift with my. But once I did start stepping on the ground normally, I felt it mainly in my lower back and my neck because I was holding for 30 years. I held it all together, so it was just very tight because I was squeezing everything just to stand still.
And this is your other one, correct?
That's the one with the block method.
Yes. Let me pull this up to the block method. Let me just blow it up so you can see.
This is where I was like relieved because I was like, wow, look at that. It looks straight.
Yep. This is the block method. This is what Sam was talking about. If you see how his pelvis is now aligned, the ACIS is aligned, those femurs are aligned, at least somewhat. But obviously one femur is shorter. That's why he's staying on the blocks. But his pelvis, this is what the surgeons always look for like that nice even pelvis, right? They say, hey, that's about this is just an estimate. Obviously when they lengthen, then they're measuring your bone and everything, but this is going to get you them very, very close. This is what my surgeon did, because a lot of time when I first got x-rayed, the techs did it incorrectly. They just took me on a standing x-ray. She said, no, send it back in there. That's not the right way. Put the blocks under his foot. And she was upset. But when I came back out and got it the right way, she was like, much better. So this is so crucial. If you were a discrepancy patient, take Sam's advice, take Amrit's advice, take my advice, take everybody's advice here and get the block method done. Ethan, did you have to get the block method done, or yes or no?
Yeah, I did have it done for. Honestly, though, I don't think I had this done for any of my images until the most recent team that I'm with when they discovered the discrepancy in my tibia and my femur. I think they were the first people to do it.
Look at that. And Ethan said it earlier, pick a good surgeon. It goes for whether it's stature, discrepancy, deformity, whatever you have. Pick a good surgeon. Okay. And it's hard to do sometimes because a lot of times we have these problems and we want to just a quick fix. We don't want to go through all the nitty gritty, but we have this resource here. You can just consult with different surgeons, but there is a difference between surgeons who would just say, hey, I can break your leg and lengthen it and know nothing about exactly, hey, Ethan, you have a discrepancy in your femur and your tibia. What do you want to do here? And give him the decision. Not, oh, it's all in your femur and overshoot it and have a mismatch with his knees for the rest of life and get extreme shearing pain. He still did that, but they at least knew that his discrepancy was what it was. So anyway, all right. And then Sam, let's see if Sam's going to come back on. Did you end up sharing?
No, I can't find the original, the original x-rays. I have a bunch of the x-rays that we did as we were lengthening, but I don't have, and then as during the consolidation phase, but I don't have the original ones. So I'll have to take a deeper dive and find those.
Sounds good. No worries there. But this was a fantastic discussion here. I mean, we have this awesome panel of discrepancy patients. I think this is going to be super helpful. It always is. I know I don't do it as regularly, but it's because there's more information out there for discrepancy than stature, and I'm trying to, change the game here and flip the industry. But I still love my discrepancy folk here, and I want to thank Sam for coming on, Ethan, Amrit, and obviously Brett for your input as well from the limb lengthening side of things. It's been super helpful. I hope everybody in the chat who is a discrepancy patient, if you've listened to this discussion today and you're wondering, should I get a discrepancy fix or limb lengthening done to fix my discrepancy? You have to think about it. Have I tried? Is it, first and foremost, is it symptomatic? Is it going to bother your quality of life? Is it going to degrade your quality of life? Can you go through a day without thinking about it? I could not. I was wearing shoe lifts, and every time I got home, I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta go take a shower. People asked me to go to the beach. I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta go to the beach. No, I'm not gonna go. This party, friends. No. But then I got the shoe build done. I could move around a lot better, but then I felt insecure about wearing this big, huge 2-inch block under my left leg. And especially in the gym with all these macho guys, are like, what's that little peg leg walking around for? So I eventually looked into limb lengthening and think about me. I was a bodybuilder, natural bodybuilder in the pro league. And it was a big decision. I didn't know if I was going to get back to the top of the sport, but I took that leap of faith. Luckily, I busted my tail in rehab and I got back up, and hopefully we'll go a world championship next year. But the point is that do everything conservatively. If it doesn't bother you, if it's not symptomatic, maybe you can do away with a shoe lift. But as you can see, we're not dead, right? We went through the surgery. We all made that decision and we're living our best lives. So I hope this discussion was informative to you. We'll do another one probably in a quarter or so after Ethan's doing all kinds of crazy stuff. Sam is back to running, or I'm sorry, after Ethan gets his nail removed, and Amrit is walking tall and doing all kinds of fun stuff. When's your next checkup, Amrit?
About 2 weeks.
Okay.
She said last time that you should be good to go to do whatever you want. So
okay,
I want to be running in 3 weeks. Let's see. That'll be a fast recovery, right?
Yeah, it would be, because you're only 3 months out. If you do it in like freaking 3.5 or basically 4 months, that's record time, man. That's good stuff. But yeah, keep me posted through email. I'm gonna send out discrepancy invites. Obviously, when we do it again, probably right around the year mark for Sam. I think it's a November. Actually, probably Ethan in October. It's about 2 months. So we'll probably do it around that fall time, Halloween time. So for discrepancy folks. So Hannah, hopefully you got some insight today from these guys, this panel. For everybody watching, thanks so much for your questions and your chats. And for episode 133, this is Victor from Cyborg for Life and all this amazing limb lengthening discrepancy patients signing out. See you guys next time. Peace.